Please welcome Leia Simon.
Hi everyone, I'm Leia Simon. I'm Steve's wife, and I'm the brains behind this whole operation. I admit I'm terrified to be up here. Speaking in front of large crowds is not my thing, but this election is too important to succumb to my fear. The threats against our elected officials and democracy itself are very real and demand all of us to step into our courage and our conviction. So here I am, speaking in front of all of you. Preserving our democracy is deeply personal to Steve and to me for countless reasons, with the top two being our children, Hannah, who is here, and our son Noah. As some of you know, Noah is on the autism spectrum and he is nonverbal, and this would not be his thing, so he is not here. To communicate, he uses an iPad, laughter, gentle nudges and pushes, and yelling. He lives for swimming, riding his scooter through the house, jumping on the trampoline with Steve, and eating a lot of bacon. So much bacon, in fact, I'm pretty sure our family is artificially inflating Hormel's microwave-ready bacon sales. But Noah can't tell us when he's in pain. He can't tell us if he's scared or why he's sad or frustrated. We may never get to see Noah go into a polling place and cast a vote. Noah needs empathetic elected officials who can understand his needs and who can advocate for him. That means we need people like all of you to vote those people into office. The stakes have never been higher. If we don't protect the freedom to vote, the future for all of us, especially the futures of marginalized and vulnerable people like Noah, will be in jeopardy.
We all know my dad is a great Secretary of State, but I also want you to know he's an amazing dad.
And a wonderful partner. That's why it makes me sick to hear Steve's opponent resort to false, manipulative attacks about not just him, but our entire election system. Our election system is not only fair, safe, and secure, but it is administered by people who are honest and trustworthy. Can you say that?
That's a fact.
That's a fact. Our opponent claims the system needs to be tweaked because it isn't safe or transparent. But we all know her real goal is to just tear it down and reinvent who can and cannot participate in our democracy. We can't let that happen, and with Steve in this office, we won't let that happen. I'm so proud of our state, our elections, and all of you, my fellow Minnesotans, who step up time and again to make your voices heard. With joy, I introduce my husband, dad to Hannah and Noah,
And the man who we are going to re-elect as our Secretary of State in November, Steve Simon.
Thank you. Let's hear it for Leia and Hannah. I am truly blessed. And I want to thank you, delegates, all of you, and tell you it is my great honor to accept your endorsement for Minnesota Secretary of State. Thank you. Thank you. You've probably heard me say many, many times that I am in the democracy business. That means I literally make it my business to protect the freedom to vote and to defend democracy and to always try to lead with the truth. For me, that mission is deeply personal. Many decades ago, my great-grandfather was a 19-year-old living in Lithuania, then part of the Russian Empire. He didn't just emigrate to America, he fled. He fled discrimination and persecution. He was what we would today call a refugee. The year before he left for America, Jews in the Russian Empire lost the right to vote. And then things got much worse. No one knows for sure what would have happened to him. No one knows for sure what would have happened to him had he stayed in Lithuania. But over 90% of the Jews there were eventually murdered in the Holocaust. So he settled here in Minnesota, where he got work as a laborer on the Mesabi Range. He started a family in Eveleth. He opened a store that supplied dry goods to the iron ore miners and their families. In America, he found freedom. He found a place where he could have a say, a voice in his own future. That freedom is just as important today as it was back then. And that is why I have pledged to do everything in my power as Secretary of State to always protect the freedom to vote. So, when I became Secretary of State, I knew that the best ideas would come from Minnesotans, from all Minnesotans, from everywhere in Minnesota, from Eveleth, from Rochester, from Mankato, from everywhere. So that first year I was Secretary of State, I went on the road. I met with local officials and college students and labor unions and chambers of commerce and tribal leaders and high school teachers and you name it. I visited every single Minnesota county, all 87, in my first year in office. Then, in my second year, I did it all over again. And by the time my third year came around, it had become an annual tradition. Some of our best ideas came from those visits and those meetings. You ought to know that. And all of our hard work paid off. When the returns came back for the election of 2016, my first as Secretary of State, I was proud to report that Minnesota had returned to its rightful place as #1 in America for voter turnout. And we repeated that achievement again 2 years later in 2018. And then came 2020. The 2020 election could have been a disaster, but instead it was a shining moment for Minnesota. Remember, this was during a once-in-a-century pandemic with no vaccine. This was pre-vaccine America. You remember, it was just a couple years ago. Remember how that was. So many of us were afraid and anxious. 2/3 of Americans said they would be nervous or apprehensive about going to a polling place during the pandemic. But together, all of us, pulling in the same direction, we worked hard to overcome those challenges. 30,000 Minnesotans, 30,000, put their health on the line in 2020 to serve as election judges in polling places throughout Minnesota. So, I want to see a show of hands. How many of you here have ever been an election judge? Let's see them. Hold them up high. Hold them up high. Thank you. Let's give these folks a round of applause. Thank you. All of you who raised your hand, it doesn't matter whether you did it in 2020 or years and years ago, you are folks who have helped to keep our democracy strong. Thank you. And by the way, when other folks attack our democracy and unfairly attack the integrity of our election system, this is who they're attacking. Everyone who raised their hands, these are your friends, these are your neighbors, these are your coworkers, the people who count the votes and keep the polls secure. The 2020 election was a stress test for democracy, and Minnesota aced the test. For the third time in a row, folks, third time in a row, Minnesota was #1 in America for voter turnout. Nearly 80% of eligible voters voted. That is a modern-day record, not just for Minnesota, but for the nation. And numbers like that speak for themselves. And you know what they say? They say that Minnesotans have faith in our elections and they vote in record numbers because they know that our elections are fundamentally fair, accurate, honest, and secure. They know it. It also helped that we had really good laws on the books and terrific partners all over the state. That's why I say the democracy business is booming in Minnesota. Of course, we still face challenges. Too many people, Indigenous Minnesotans, people living in poverty, and so many others still face barriers to voting. What good is the freedom to vote if exercising it is harder than it needs to be? We have to change that. We need to do better. Another huge challenge is disinformation. That's a polite way of saying lies. Lies about our election system and about the last election in particular. Now, some good people in Minnesota and in America have been taken in by the lies of self-interested politicians who secretly disrespect them. You don't respect people by lying to them. You do it by looking them in the eye and telling them the truth. Those who spread disinformation about our election system claim to be motivated by election integrity. Give me a break. Folks, if you think that the lies and the increasingly bizarre conspiracy theories about our election system are motivated truly by election integrity, I've got a pillow factory I'd like to sell you. Folks, it is not election integrity. In fact, it's not any kind of integrity to traffic in disinformation. The lies about our election system are designed to incite, and they have. We know this. On January 6, 2021, we saw lies lead to a violent assault on the United States Capitol. Rioters killed people. But we've also seen an assault in state capitals on the freedom to vote. Not just in Georgia, not just in Florida, not just in Texas, not just in those other places, but here, right here in Minnesota, where legislation would take us backwards by making it harder for eligible people to vote. The best way to stand up and push back is to tell the truth, to not let the lies and the sore loser laws cancel the votes of millions of Americans, to say out loud and often what we know to be true. Our election system is fundamentally fair, accurate, honest, and secure. But, as good as it is, there are more things we can do to make it even better. We can and we should. We should upgrade to automatic voter registration. We should give 16 and 17-year-olds the option of pre-registering to vote. We should adopt true early voting by streamlining our system. And we should restore voting rights to those who have left prison behind. We can improve and perfect the democracy that drew my great-grandfather to America, that gave him a voice, that gave him just a little piece of power. But when I think about freedom and democracy, I think not just of him, but of my own father. My dad died just a few days after the 2018 election, so he got to vote for me one last time for Secretary of State. For many years before he died, my dad had Parkinson's disease. And for many years it was manageable because my mom helped him manage it. She was his protector, his advocate, and his best friend. But then, in 1999, she died very suddenly, only 12 days after her cancer diagnosis. We were all obviously shocked at the loss of the light of our family, and suddenly my dad was plunged into darkness. He got a lot worse. Within a few years, he was seriously debilitated. I used to take him to the polls in Hopkins on Election Day. I saw him struggle to stand and sometimes even struggle to mark the ballot. A few years later, when I was chair of the Elections Committee in the Minnesota House of Representatives, I had a chance to do something for people like my dad. And I'm proud to tell you, I took that chance. I wrote and passed the law that allows any eligible voter to vote from home. It's a law that gave freedom to so many people. And it's the law that saved the 2020 election by ensuring that people did not have to choose between their health and the chance to vote. Behind every ballot, there's a person, a life story. Every ballot is physical evidence of a person's voice, and that is such a powerful thing. My great-grandfather fled Eastern Europe as a terrorized Jewish teenager, left the only home he had ever known because he wanted freedom. Many years later, my father struggled late in his life to exercise his own freedom. Every generation has a responsibility to sustain and strengthen the freedom that millions of people have sought and found here. That's what this election is all about. Protecting the freedom to vote, defending democracy, and pushing back against disinformation, extremism, and hyper-partisan schemes that would take us backwards and weaken our best-in-the-nation election system. You know, President Kennedy was right when he said democracy is never a final achievement. It is a call to an untiring effort. The question is, for all of us, in 2022, do we still have the ability to hear that call? do we still have the power to answer that call? I say yes. We are Minnesotans. We are Americans. Together we can, together we must, and I know together we will. Thank you very much. Let's do it. Let's win. Thank you.